This episode was recorded last week and before the most recent updates regarding the Trey Reed case. Ever since the first hours after Trey Reed's body was found hanging from a tree in Mississippi, the police have ruled out foul play. The civil rights representative for the Reed family, Ben Crump, himself questioned the validity of such a rush to judgment. The family is adamant that 21-year-old Trey was happy and looking forward to his year at university. If this wasn't suicide, who did it? And why is it being covered up? If it was suicide, beyond any doubt, then what changed? Why did Trey go from being the happy and enthusiastic kid to someone who felt the need to hang himself from a tree? In the second part of our discussion, we refer to the manipulative nature of politics. In the 1980s, with the war on drugs, the 2000s and the war on terror, to now labeling anti-genocide movements terrorists, or, as in the case of Trump, calling any anti-fascist movement terrorist. We have to draw attention to the real danger we are in. When leaders in society want to crack down not on hateful and insightful speech, but those social movements that fight against murder, racism, civil rights abuses, and genocide, then the principle of the rule of law no longer exists. If the rule of law no longer exists, then democracy no longer exists. Thank you, Esheru, for your time. This is Two on a Mic. Rise up and be curious.
Dung weche pek kod welo mabiro e Two under Mic. Dung parodit kod jok mawuoye Two under Mic. Seche tin sud buta wawinji e Two under Mic. Ola wachokre wabed piny biwawinje ero chako momit ndi Two and a Mic podcast makende.
I'm joined again by my good friend Esheru. Esheru, how's it going?
Yeah, not too bad. The world has been a lot crazy since we last spoke, but I'm in good spirits.
Yeah, good. As much as I always value our opportunities to talk, it's unfortunate that we always come together to talk about obviously quite serious and distressing topics. None more so than today's initial topic, which is about these two young men, one Trey Reed, who was 21, Corey Zucati, a bit older at 36, but two black men found hanging from trees in Mississippi. How?
Well, you know, this doesn't surprise me if you look at the climate of the United States, okay? Over the last 10 years, okay, the country has recorded 5 hangings, okay, 5 lynchings, if you will. All of them black men, okay? All of them have been found hanging from a tree, and all of them have been ruled suicide or no foul play. I'll read the names out for you here because I have a list of them. There's a guy called Otis Bird, 2015, Mississippi. Yeah. Roosevelt Champion, 2015, Georgia. Robert Fuller, 2020, California. Malcolm Harsh, 2020, California. Emmanuel Amani, Kildare, Morrissey, New Jersey. And of course, as you just said, Trey Reed, Mississippi. Every single one of the deaths had been ruled, and I'll go through them very quickly. Federal investigators dropped a hate crime inquiry. Second one, ruled suicide. Third, authorities eventually ruled his death as suicide. Fourth, authorities said surveillance footage confirmed no foul play. Toxicology, etc. reports were pending still to date. 5 years later, no reports have been given. Fourth, investigators ruled the death as suicide. And at the last one, the time of reporting, investigators say no obvious physical signs of foul play, autopsy pending. It's just fascinating that these black men who were of sound mind, from what all the friends and family have said, had careers in front of them. All of them were studying or within certain professions. It's funny how come from decent middle class neighborhoods. They're not poor, they're not broken, they're not come from a disadvantaged background, which is what you would probably expect from somebody that commits suicide, right? But all of them have been found hanging from trees, and every death has been ruled a suicide. To me, what I'm seeing is the pattern that these men are being lynched, okay? And instead of actually doing the legwork and investigating the crime itself, the police are putting a suicide tag on it so they don't have to investigate any further, because despite the fact that we have asked for Black Lives to matter, they really don't matter to the authorities.
No, indeed. And the list that you gave, I think you excluded Corey Tsukatis, 36.
Thank you.
Yeah, he was a homeless guy, so he not middle class, not somebody who had the possibilities before him that some of the others had, but it still fits the descriptions that you match for all of these other cases. And as you say, to return this kind of a decision that there was no foul play, it removes from the authorities the need to conduct a detailed investigation. But the other issue is that it removes from them the need to find potential murderers. And when we're talking about the rise of white supremacy, as we have seen in the last 10 years, which is the period that you're also referring to, then it is conceivable that if these were lynchings, as we strongly believe them to have been, who else could have done it but white supremacists?
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest problems that I'm noticing today, not just in the United States, but also here in Europe, is the downplaying of white supremacy, the downplaying of far-right white nationalism. Over here in Britain, I don't want to sway too far off the subject, but I just want to bring you to the riots that we experienced last summer, which was dubbed the Farage riots. Nigel Farage being the leader of a challenging opposition party, for those listeners who don't know who Farage is. And the entire media core, and even recently with some of the protests that we've had with far right here, the media plays down what it is they're actually doing by saying that they're concerned citizens. These are concerned parents with legitimate concerns. We know, had it been black people or brown people out demonstrating for more or less the same thing, they would never have been labeled with such soothing language. And this is a problem. They're downplaying the role that white supremacy has in all of this, and that's, in my opinion, is very dangerous, because it's them denying that a problem exists, and because there's no problem, there's no need to fix it, right?
Well, yeah, and it's also being reported more or less in a way which gives these people, I don't want to say 9 lives, but it gives them carte blanche, more or less, as in they can keep messing around, keep screwing around, keep screwing around, and it's only until, all right, you've past this certain level, which we can't continue hiding anymore, but they almost always get the benefit of that. Whenever, for example, in the USA, if there's a shooter who's a black shooter, that guy's dead. But you get a shooter who's white, he's got a chance.
I often, whenever there are, when I've been on social media, I often like to post the arrest of Dylan Roof, the shooter who shot 7 people praying in a church, and a guy called Peyton Gendron. He was one that shot 10 black people in a convenience store in upstate Buffalo, New York, and he live streamed it. And I always love to show the arrest videos. They're available on YouTube for anyone who wants to see. And if you see how calmly the police arrest these 2 guys after one shooting and killing 7 and the other shooting and killing 10. If you see the respect that is shown by law enforcement officials, it's something to watch. Because I've seen an incident where a young black lady, she was waiting in her car, beautiful summer's day. She may have been in Florida, she may have been in Los Angeles, and She's waiting in her car. She's on her phone. Police officer taps on the window and he asks her, "What are you doing here?" She says, "I'm just finishing my call." Finishes the call and she says, "I'm waiting for my friend. It's my birthday. She's coming to meet me. We're going to go out and have lunch or dinner." The police officer then tells her to get out of the car. She says, "Well, I haven't done anything." The police officer then smashes the window and drags her out of the car. And she just sat there, minding her own business on her birthday. And then you see the level. And this isn't one single occurrence. This is something that happens often in the US, but still people have this doubt in their mind, like, she should have complied with the police, or was the police wrong in doing that? Was he right? Did he suspect? And that would never happen to white people. It just wouldn't. I mean, you can shoot and kill 10 people and they'll show you respect. And that says a lot about law enforcement in the United States.
You bring up a good point, because I posted a video on TikTok and one or two people came back and said that, yeah, the police have returned this as a no foul play. The coroner has looked at it and said, actually, no, there are no broken limbs, no broken bones in the case of Trey Reed. You can't say this is racist because the police officers investigating were black. I think they may have mentioned that the coroner was black as well. And for some reason, people seem to think that if there are black people involved in the investigation, then that means race cannot become an issue. And I find that to be naive, extremely simplistic. And people also, they have to realize that even if you've got a black person who is a police officer, that person is representing an organization which is built against the interests of minorities and people of color.
Absolutely. This is a perfect sleight of hand played by the authorities, okay? Often when they want to implement the most harshest draconian measures, they'll put a black and brown face in position to implement those harsh changes. This is something that we've witnessed over here in Great Britain. But like you said, when you look at the power structure of the United States or the police in most countries, certainly in the United States and Britain, it has been built on the subjugation and the premise that where they want to keep minorities in a certain space, in a box, if you will. And of course, they like to promote or employ black and brown faces to come and work within the force and say, this is the changing face of the police force. But nothing really changes. These people have just become agents of the those who are in charge in the system itself. But the system never really changes. It's very much the same. It may get a bit of wallpaper that's different every now and again, but it still very much remains the same, festering cracks underneath.
I will not be surprised because the family has sought legal representation, and this legal representation, we're talking about Trey Reed in this case, and this legal representation has asked for an independent review of the scenario, the potential crime scene. So we may, in fact, hear something new. However, I've been doing a search every 12 hours, more or less, just to try to see if the case has kind of moved forward, if there's anything new coming out. The family themselves are staying quite tight-lipped. They don't want to say anything that may, at some point, then create problems for any kind of case that may be created. But every time I type in Trey Reed, just Trey Reed, I don't type in death, I don't type in murder, I don't type in lynching, nothing. Trey Reed, usually the very first hit that I get links me to the murder of Charlie Kirk. And when I look down the page, I think more or less half of the links refer me to Charlie Kirk and the other half only Trey Reed.
Why do you think that is?
I may have a few suspicions with regards to the algorithm.
Share one of them.
To be honest, it seems as though everything is geared towards people realizing that, listen, it happens to white people. But I think what they really want to do is that they want to push people to continuously think about this person. They want him to be front and center in everybody's considerations. And they want to push, obviously, their ideological perspectives and saying the left did this, or a certain group of people did this, and we have to combat them and their perspectives.
I agree with you. I think that algorithms definitely being manipulated on social media and all search engines, and they want to give less credence. Or for centuries, white people have been taught subliminally to not empathize with people of color. And what I mean by that is, no one sat there and said to them, "Don't empathize with people of color," pointing a finger. But through the media, through popular culture, through TV, through film, there's these subtle things that you see happening, these small microaggressions that you often hear. For example, back in the day, there used to be a police show called Cops, and it was always black people being arrested. Okay. Back in the day, whenever they made films, they used to typecast black people and tell them as a baddie and a robber. And what happens is, when you grow up, what it does, it shows people of color who it gives us, it's a daily drip feed where people of color are automatically seen as bad. And if you look at all the superheroes who are all white, come to save the day in America, they're all white men. Okay. And it gives you these daily drip feeds, this impression into you that you grew up then believing that this group of people over here are bad, this group of people over here are automatically good. And the algorithms of the modern day era continues that, but in a much more sophisticated way. You understand? And they want people to continue believing that these people, but we've got to the point where things have gotten so bad in society that, of course, we are better read today than we have ever been before. Because, or should I say, we have access to more information than we've ever had before. And people are now seeing the world for what it is. So those who hold those racist, bigoted, homophobic, etc. views tend to be people who are outliers on the extremities of society. And these are the people who they target. Am I making sense?
Absolutely. It's very interesting also because you tie in these pain points with the other topic also, which we want to quickly touch on, where we've got, for example, in the United States, but also I believe I would imagine something like this has happened also in the UK. But in the USA in particular, you've got a president now who is reducing people's access to real history. As in, you know, when you said people are better read today and people have more access, what is it that they're reading though? Because you and I have spoken about this before, and you have been particularly critical of people's inability to think critically themselves. So what are we reading is the first thing. And secondly, we've got governments who are changing history as it's taught. They're changing the exhibits in museums. They're changing websites. They are removing people from histories on certain organizations, and they're removing key words from databases.
We have access to more information than at any other time in history right about now. However, people are less informed today than they were 100 or so years ago. And what it is because there's a lot of information that's out there available to read, but a lot of the information doesn't often have credible sources. These are often blogs that are not properly researched. There's no scientific research being done. There's no empirical data being pulled from anywhere. People are just putting stuff together or using not even smart sets, but using small sets of data, extrapolating figures to make a problem appear to be much, much larger than it actually is. We had a case here in Britain with Pakistani grooming gangs where a right-wing group managed to use figures out of a 15-year period. They chose one particular year where the numbers were astronomically high. All the other years are relatively low, and there's one year where there's an actual huge spike. And they used that year as the basis for a whole report that was then reported on by the entire media. And it was only years later people realized, hold on, but this was wrong. They never looked into it properly, and they used the wrong set of data. But the damage has already been done. There's a very similar thing with the internet and what's on the web. That there's a lot of information on there that's factually incorrect, but it does the job that those who are writing it want it to do. And then at a time in the future when we realize that, hold on, but this was wrong 5 years ago, the damage has already been done, it's already affected or infected. And I'll use something that Denzel Washington not so long ago said. He said that the truth no longer matters in the media anymore. It's about being first. And that's all that matters. If you can get your piece of information out first, who cares if it is truthful or not? As long as it does what it's supposed to do. And that's to get people to think a certain way. That's where we're at today.
Yeah, and also what is unfortunate is that the same fake news is recycled. And even though, as you say, people have shown it to be false, they've shown them to be lies,
Right.
5 years later, they forget that they were lies. Not the people telling them, they know that they were lies. But the other people who are critical of it, they forget that these were lies in the first place, and they simply get regurgitated. So it kind of makes it reinforces them, because then you get a second set of headlines, of course. But then you also get different people quoting it. So people are like, oh, well, it must be true if a politician is saying it.
But this is a very thing, right? When people believe politicians to be truthful, or it's on the news, so it must be honest and truthful, and they don't realize that these people are also battling for airtime and battling to have the latest information. And to be honest, I don't know where it ends, because right about now, when we look at the way the world has been shaping up, we've got this very, very well bankrolled far right wing white nationalists across the US and Europe and certainly here in Britain. And these people are agents of chaos, right? They harbor a lot of hate and dislike for others. And what we're seeing right now is information being spread on a lot of channels and organizations that are professionally set up by people who subscribe to this ideology. I mean, you even have academics who are aligned with some of these organizations, and they're pushing out content, and this content does look like it can be real. Charlie Kirk, I believe, started a organization called Turning Point USA some years ago. And there's one here in Britain called Turning Point UK, and they do exactly the same thing. A lot of information, and they align themselves with an organization called Migration Control, who also spews a lot of nonsense about the amount of people coming in the country through unconventional means. And it's an entire business model.
Yeah, and there are also so many of these think tanks, aren't there, that get funding, and they're pumping out material. If there's anything that people should try to learn from these fascist groups, and unfortunately they are fascist, they hide behind academia, but they are fascist groups. They are vociferous. These guys are hard-nosed. They produce content like crazy. They unify. They activate groups in many different parts of the world. They are a strong network, and they are relentless. And I think the left has to realize what they're up against, because even though Trump, we're going to get onto this now, but even though Trump has made moves against the left does not have the organized network that the right wing has.
But this is the very thing. The right wing control the media, they control the narrative. You'll often hear them attack, the people on the left. I mean, just look what happened with the death of Charlie Kirk. Even without any evidence available to them, the first thing they did was blame the left. There was no available evidence. They were blaming the left, leftist this, leftist that, and people went on a mad rant. Then it came out that this guy was actually a Republican Mormon, and then there was silence. But then I saw Megyn Kelly from Fox News, I think yesterday or 2 days ago. She blamed Obama for what had happened. And then I sat thinking to myself, these people are so unhinged. One of the biggest problems, and the reason why they're unhinged is because they know that whatever they say, the media channel will back them. Whatever media channel, they will be backed, they will be supported, because it's the right that controls the media. And the left is, I mean, I sound defeatist here, but I don't know what more we can actually do on the left in order to beat this devil, because no matter how much content we put out, I find that, we put out one piece, they put out 10, 20, and those 10 and 20 are all lies. We deal with facts, but ours gets drowned out because there's so much of that. And this is where we are.
I really think the left kind of drowns itself in academia. It drowns itself in analytics. It drowns itself in theoretical elements and, ideology. As in, I was having a very entertaining, I'd say, exchange with a very intelligent person who was talking about socialism. And the thing is, you say one thing in a group of socialists, and that's it. That group is now lost to ideological analysis that goes back 100 years. And look, we're not there. We're not there anymore. We are no longer sitting in the Viennese cafe trying to analyze which ideology will best serve humanity. We are very much on the political front lines wherever we find ourselves, because the internet represents a front line. That's it. And we are there, and we have to respond to things that are happening in the moment in a way that majorities of people will understand in different regions. But we're not doing that. We are appealing to people's compassions. We are appealing to people's understanding, and people can only consume bite-sized chunks of information, and they can only understand headlines. They can only understand slogans. They no longer want to get involved in the details. The left wing doesn't give that to them.
No, exactly, and that's exactly it. I think we live in the TikTok era, I like to call it. Although TikTok shouldn't get the blame, because it really started with Twitter, right? With, was it 149 characters or whatever it was? I can't remember. But people that can only consume information in small snippets. Nobody has time, or nobody wants to even invest the time to read a thought-provoking article. And also, let's remember, those of us on the left, they like to call us radical left and hard left and far left, but anything that is left of center, and I'm just left of center. I'm not a far left in any way or radical, but I'm probably just left of center. But I'm considered far left to the extreme to these people, because I'm just not right.
Yeah.
Or right wing, I should say.
Yeah, I read a pamphlet by Karl Marx, and I was thinking to myself, nah. That just doesn't represent anything that I think. And I'm a socialist, and I don't believe in any of this kind of things where they say this concept of taking property away from people that have worked hard to own it. No, I don't want to do that at all. So people have to realize you cannot look at a socialist and think Karl Marx. However, it helps the right wing to be able to label everybody who's left as a communist.
It's a lazy thought, but it's good for them to think that way, right? And then there's that quote, and they misquote Martin Luther King when they think it's pertinent to do so against his children's wishes. They're constantly misquoting him, saying stupid things like, "Oh, you guys should stop talking about racism." Dr. Martin Luther King, this is not what he envisaged, but he didn't envisage the world where you continue to oppress people and pretend that you're not, and then claim that you're living through, equality. Yeah. They very rarely see themselves and what they contribute, because they believe that they're right. You cannot have logical discussions with people whose opinions are based on emotions.
Well, that brings us to our final sort of talking point, which we've already begun in certain ways. We're talking about the unfortunate, shall we say, consideration a lot of the mainstream has for left-wing ideas. Now Trump has declared, he's hinted that he wants to do this in the past, but now he's declared on his trip to the UK. I don't know how he should be allowed into the UK. I can't believe that Herzog was allowed into the UK. Anyway, these people, genocidal maniacs, are being quite happily invited to the UK, and the red carpet is being rolled out before them. But Trump wants to make AntiFa, which isn't even an organization. It means anti-fascist. He wants to make anti-fascist something illegal. He's calling it a terrorist organization, even though it's not an organization. Clearly, what he's trying to do is basically build a vehicle he can use to clamp down on any kind of left-wing dissent of what he does.
Absolutely. If you look what's happened in the United States over recent weeks and months, just the last few days, he has clamped down on anyone that has posed a challenge to what he's doing. Anyone even that has said anything about the death of Charlie Kirk, he's trying to shut down. But it's because I'm not sure if you watched The Handmaid's Tale, but what we're seeing right now is the takeover. I don't know if you guys remember the listeners will remember that's the very first part. But people are not seeing it because just before the election, we spoke a lot about Project 2025. Nobody's talking about Project 2025 no more. But I'm reading a lady on Substack called Heather Cox Richardson, very good blog, by the way. And she's putting everything down for you in real time and what's happening in the US. And we're not getting everything, but she lives there. She's telling you what's going on. She's not just a blogger. She has worked in politics. She's very well educated. She's from academia. She knows her stuff. So it isn't just a hobby blogger. This woman's telling you what's happening in real time in the US. And you're sat there with your mouth open while you're reading what's going on. And the takeover's happening right now in the US. Donald Trump is putting the pieces in position for him to be able to do what he likes without being answerable to anybody. And it's one of the reasons why he surrounded himself with yes men and women that fawn over him and do not defy him and does exactly what he wants of them. And what we're seeing now with him trying to clamp down on leftist groups is to be able to give the groups on the right free rein to do whatever it is they like. This is where we're living. A country which claims to have been good at overthrowing dictators, which we know is just a farce because they've installed more dictators than they've overthrown.
They're overthrowing democracies.
Exactly. Is now at the foot of dictatorship itself. And I know that sounds really weird to many, but please watch the episode of Handmaid's Tale, The Takeover. It's there. All of it's right there. Very prophetic.
I didn't watch the series. I read the book instead, and I found it extremely thought-provoking. It also reminds me of a book by Christina Dalcher called Vox, where the women can only speak 100 words a day because they have a device on them which sends them electric shocks. But with Trump bringing Antifa, shall we say, into this illegal, this terrorist structure that Western leaders are creating, because let's not forget, Starmer and his government did the same thing for Palestine Action. Doesn't it kind of remind you of some of the other, shall we say, slogans that presidents in the past have created to attack specific groups of individuals? I mean, Reagan called it the war on drugs, but who did he really target?
We targeted black people.
Exactly.
It was black America that was targeted based on the war on drugs. I mean, even the welfare queen slogan that he used. You look at the United States, the biggest recipients of any government aid or government state funds have always been white Americans in every aspect across the United States, whether that's grants, whether that's loans, whether that's money being given. But when white American wives were given money from the government, it was called state aid. But fast forward to the 80s, when it was only made available to white families initially. But fast forward to the 1980s, when black families started receiving it, then they tried to make it a bad thing. So they called it welfare queens. But it was the same damn thing that was going on. But they gave it a bad name when black people were doing it. And again, they've always targeted black America.
Yep. And then fast forward again from war on drugs to the war on terror. The war on terror was supposed to target terrorist groups. What it actually ended up doing was giving the USA the opportunity to basically go to war with any country in the Middle East that did not want to follow the Western imperialist model. And they made a lot of money in the process.
Absolutely. And the war on terror was a euphemism for a war on Islam. So it was they were able to clamp down on Muslims as well as their own people as well. What we should always remember is whenever they want to bring in some bold new idea and plan, you have to look at the bigger picture. Over here in Great Britain, right about now, slightly different subject, but where I see it going, they want to bring in something called a government ID. So I think this is an electronic ID for you to be able to do things online, but they're selling it as people who are receiving benefits have to take it, because if they don't, then they're going to stop receiving their benefits. But eventually they'll roll it out to everybody else, because it will be, well, in order for you to get your passport renewed, you need a government ID. In order for you to open a bank account or get a driver's license, renew your driver's license, you'll need a government ID. So it will be rolled out to everybody else. But they'll always initially sell it as a good thing for this group of people here. But it then affects everybody else in society later on.
Yeah. And with this Antifa, slightly changing the wording, shall we say, of the vehicle that the government is going to use, who are they going to target? Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ, women?
Absolutely.
these are the groups that they're going to target.
Absolutely. You've always got to look at the stuff that they're not focusing on. Look at the background. They'll say this is what it's for, and it's for everybody's benefit. Oh, we're trying to save you from these leftist nutters. We're trying to save you. No. It's about spying on you. It's about spying on and looking. And if we look at the way the world is shaping, we don't have to look at the companies that are receiving the most money, what it is they're trying to do. Palantir is a very big organization receiving, God knows, hundreds of millions in aids, state aids. They literally got their hands over here in Europe, mostly here in Britain,
and in Germany too.
Yeah, handling patients.
Yeah,
handling patients and handling data from organizations. And what they actually do with that data is nefarious. They're building, putting together profiles of individuals within countries and selling that back to government. I mean, but they're selling the idea of, oh, this is going to help companies become better and more efficient. That's how they sell it to you. No. That's not what's happening.
Yeah, this is unfortunately there's a proverb that says, "Don't bite the hand that feeds you," but now we have to update that to saying, "Beware of the hand that feeds you." Eshrut, thank you very much for your analysis, for your insights. It's always a pleasure, even when we talk about these kinds of horrific developments. But thank you very much again, brother, and look forward to the next one.
Lovely. Thank you for having me. I look forward to it.
And mic.